Well, I think that today architecture can deal with very different aspects, and our studio, Calorati Associati, intends architecture as a discipline that tries to analyze the impact of digital technologies on our cities. So we are interested in seeing how digital technologies are impacting the way in which we live, design, and think about cities. And this can be extended to many variables, for example, social variables, economic variables. And I think this is one of the main challenges that architecture is facing today. Well, in the case of our studio, I think we situate ourselves between at least two countries, that is Italy and the United States. And if I have to think at how we somehow get to incorporate different ideas into our studio coming from these two different countries, I think the definition of sensible city, which is the name of the laboratory directed by Calorati at MIT, but also like a very strong influence for the work of Calorati Associati. Well, I think that the definition of sensible city is a very interesting way of balancing an influence of the American culture and vision of the smart city, so technologically advanced and with a deep focus on the research, and at the same time an Italian influence in which you see the city as the place where a person and the individual is at the center of your focus. So we shift from the idea of smart city, which is traditionally putting the technology as an end in itself, to sensible city, which is a smart city but intended to be more close to the needs of the people. So a city that can both sense, which is a reference to digital technologies, and be sensible, which means being closer to people and their needs, and also their daily, let's say, way of interpreting the urban environment. I think that the theme of this year Venice Biennale is the sign of a return of some interest in social topics in architecture. Like architecture is perhaps going back to ways of social engagements after a period, after like 20 years, especially in 1990s and maybe the first decade of the new century, in which architecture was more or less focused on, let's say, these individual figures of architects building regardless of the context. So like architecture was becoming like a voice of globalization. Maybe now we see something different, and this biennale could be an expression of that. And in the case of our studio, we try to analyze how digital technologies can be adapted to the local context, so they don't necessarily become something that will erase the local heritage, but on the contrary, we want to analyze how digital technologies can, let's say, engage with the heritage and how we can adapt to local context. Well, I think Europe is really vast and there are many different situations, but perhaps Europe has the lack of having one of the best public spaces, some of the best cities in the world, and so one of the challenges is how to preserve the high functionality of these cities, which are the result of centuries of stratifications and reflection on urban culture, at the same time being able to keep innovating, so not, let's say, stacking our city in a way of preservation that prevents any further change. And in this sense, I think that the challenge is exactly this one, and we are somehow lucky that if we look at sensors and digital technologies and all, let's say, the digital revolution, it entails an infrastructure which is compatible with all cities, as opposed to, for example, the industrial era in which architecture was completely different and not compatible with the old cities. And now we are dealing with technologies which are light and non-invasive, so they can be potentially adapted also to our old cities. And to come to the Balkan region, I think that the main challenge here, at least as an observer, is to incorporate the different influences, cultural influences, religious influences, and to shape a new vision for architecture and for society. So create new public spaces that are able to take advantage of all these various influences. Well, I think that what we are seeing here today in Tirana is a very positive example of how this can be done. And it is perhaps by adopting a multidisciplinary, or let's say a cross-disciplinary approach to architecture. So if architecture is able to involve other professionals and to engage with the larger society, I think it can really play a crucial role, and it can help society to change and have a real impact on that. I think that if we look at what happened in the last 2 decades, so we saw emergence of internet, and this truly changed our lives. What we're seeing now is the next step of the digital revolution, that is, internet is entering the physical space, so it's becoming the so-called Internet of Things. And in this way, it is impacting our cities, because it is entering in the, let's say, classic domain of architecture. And I think that the Internet of Things can be a really great catalyst for changes and for improvements. Of course, we have to be able to accept it and to understand the potential threats, but for most, the opportunity that this is giving us. Well, I think that architecture, and we think at our studio that architecture should become able to think big again. So possibly challenges the status quo and how society is composed, but in a different way from what it has been done in the past. So we are now proposing a different approach, which is not anymore a top-down one. So we don't think that architects know anymore what is best for society at large, as it happened, or as architects thought it was during this 20th century. But perhaps we should approach a different way of architecture, in which we will work with other disciplines in a collective way, and in which we insist on the dynamics of participation. So the main challenge is how to think big, at the same time being able to trigger a debate and really develop this cross-disciplinary and open approach.